Hi, I'm Tracy, and today we're making 4 different kinds of gluten-free brownie mixes and giving them my honest review. Krusteaz, Betty Crocker, King Arthur, and Addi's. Each brownie mix can be made in an 8x8 glass pan. I'll be using canola oil since it's a neutral flavored oil, a tablespoon or liquid measuring cup depending on the volume of oil and water I need to add, and cold eggs right from the refrigerator. For each, I need to preheat the oven and grease a pan. To mix these, I use the simplest tool someone might have, a fork. I thought each brand mixed together easily, except for Addi's. That one made my arm tired, so I'd use an electric mixer if I was going to make it again. As a side note, Krusteaz mix had white chunks that I figured would dissolve during baking. After spreading the batter in my pan, it's time to bake. Each brand had a different cooking time or temperature. I baked each for the minimum baking time suggested for an 8x8 glass pan. Addi's was the only mix that required more time than was recommended. It needed 52 minutes to bake. I made a separate review for Addi's, which is linked at the top of the video. I use a knife just like a toothpick. If it comes out clean, the brownies are done. These brownies are room temperature. Addi's fell in the middle when it was baking, and King Arthur fell in the middle as it cooled, so neither is uniform in thickness. Krusteaz and King Arthur both have a nice flaky brownie top, and Betty Crocker is close to having one. But Addi's has a rigid, hard crust, and it's not as pretty. As I'm cutting into them, they all feel fudgy and moist, except for Addi's, which feels like I'm cutting into a soft cookie with crunchy edges. The corner piece compared to the middle of Addi's clearly shows the variation in thickness. The others are fairly similar in thickness. Breaking these apart, Krusteaz, Betty Crocker, and King Arthur feel like normal brownies, fudgy and moist. But Addi's is more crumbly and feels like it has a defined top and bottom crust with a gooey middle. Krusteaz still has weird white chunks. Here are 2 of the white chunks from both the uncooked and the cooked Krusteaz mix. The texture of the chunks before baking feel like the hard mini marshmallows from pre-made hot chocolate, which made me think that they'd dissolve, but I was wrong. After baking, they feel even harder. Looking at the ingredients, I'm not sure what they'd be, but it makes me unsure about the mix. I wouldn't want to make these and bring them to a party if they have weird hard white chunks hiding in them. It's time to taste. Krusteaz has a strange flavor. It tastes like a mix of cornstarch and nuts, and I don't really like it. The chocolate and sweetness levels seem balanced, but it's hard to assess since the negative flavor is so strong. The texture is great though. It's fudgy and moist. Betty Crocker's is delicious. It's balanced and has the perfect levels of chocolate and sweetness with no bitterness or negative flavors. The little chocolate chips pack in tasty bursts of chocolate, which I love. King Arthur's is divine. It's fudgy and moist and has the perfect balance of chocolate and sweetness. There's no bitterness or negative flavors. I feel like I could eat this whole pan. Addi's has a nice balanced flavor of chocolate and sweetness, but the texture is a bit difficult to get past. The crust on the top and bottom make me feel like I'm eating a cookie, but the flavor is of a brownie. This made me wonder if I'd get different results baking Addi's in a larger metal pan. I did, and if you're interested, I made a separate review of Addi's, which is linked at the top of the video. For Krusteaz, I'd give appearance 3 stars. It has a great top crust, but I took off a star for the weird white chunks and since the brownies don't hold together once cut. Taste is 1 star. I didn't think its flavor was close to brownies. Texture is 4 stars. It's fudgy and moist, but I took off a star for the hard white chunks. Overall, I'd rate this as 2.5 out of 5, and I wouldn't recommend it primarily due to its flavor. Betty Crocker gets 3 stars for appearance. It almost has the flaky top crust, but not quite, and the brownies don't hold together once cut. Taste is 5 stars. It's well balanced in chocolate and sweetness, and the chocolate chips are an added bonus. Texture is 5 stars. It's fudgy and moist, and the chocolate chips add some fun mouthfeels. Overall, I'd rate this as 4 out of 5, with the only downside is not having a characteristic flaky top crust. For King Arthur, I'd give appearance 2.5 stars since it fell in the middle as it cooled, but it does have the flaky brownie crust. However, it doesn't hold together well once cut. Taste gets 5 stars. It's delicious and is well balanced between chocolate and sweetness. Texture also gets 5 stars. It's fudgy and moist, just like normal brownies. Overall, I'd rate this as 4 out of 5, with the only downside being when the brownies fell as they cooled. Addi's gets 2 stars for appearance. It's not pretty. It doesn't have the flaky brownie crust, and it fell in the middle during baking, so it's not close to being uniform in thickness. Taste is decent. I'd give it 4 stars only because the texture is throwing me off a bit to properly assess it. The texture gets 2 stars since it has a hard top and bottom crust and a fudgy middle. It's like eating a cookie. Overall, I'd rate this as 3.5 out of 5 stars since the flavor is pretty good, but the texture and appearance aren't great. So, the winners are Betty Crocker and King Arthur, both with 4 out of 5 stars. Choosing between these, I think, will come down to preference and dietary restrictions. I don't think you can go wrong with either. If you choose King Arthur, I'd recommend using a metal pan. I made a separate full review for each of these, which are linked by their review.